Hello and welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to a new edition of the Daily Debate. In tonight's show, we're going to be looking at the state's efforts to try and secure its food security amid the current global trade challenges. We're going to be focusing on this file tonight. But before we start doing that, let's check out a couple of the stories making the news today. And we'll start off with Prime Minister Mustafa Madbouli, who hailed the strong historical relations binding Egypt and Bahrain. During his meeting with the Bahraini ambassador to Egypt, Fawzia bint Abdullah, Premier Madbouli further said the government is keen to boost bilateral cooperation in all fields. Madbouli praised the support of President Abdel Fatah and his Bahraini counterpart, King Hamad bin Isa Al Khalifa, to enhance the Egyptian-Bahraini relations in various domains. For her part, the Bahraini ambassador stressed her country's keenness to launch a new phase of developing bilateral relations to deepen the development partnership between the two countries. And Foreign Minister Sameh Shoukry and his New Zealand counterpart, Winston Peters, discussed the humanitarian crisis in Gaza over the phone today. The top two diplomats probed political and diplomatic moves to fully implement UN and General Assembly resolutions. Decisions by the ICJ over Gaza also topped the agenda of their conversation. During the call, Minister Shoukry reviewed moves and the Egyptian communications towards the necessity to reach a ceasefire agreement and a prisoner swap. He highlighted the role of the UNRWA in offering vital services to Palestinian refugees. He said international donors must continue supporting the UNRWA. The two sides also stressed on the importance of the available opportunities to cement bilateral ties on the political and economic fields. These were a couple of the stories making the news today, but now turning our attention to tonight's topic. Let's check out this report regarding the state's efforts in trying to achieve food security for the citizens amid the global trade challenges, and we'll be right back.
Food security is a pressing topic in Egypt, as the country's most vulnerable groups are threatened by inflation, currency devaluations, water scarcity and environmental degradation, as stated by the country's strategic plan 2023-2028 presented to the World Food Bank in late June. Minister of Agriculture and Land Reclamation Said Al-Qusir said the state spares no effort to achieve food security for citizens, adding that the agricultural sector had witnessed an unprecedented leap that aimed at achieving a balanced development. According to the minister, Egypt also achieved self-sufficiency in many crops, including vegetables, fruits and others, with a surplus for export. The minister further noted that Egypt had also managed to narrow the production gap for other crops, including wheat, corn, beans and others, as per President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi's directives to increase agricultural productivity and expand agricultural output. He said there had been a boom in agricultural exports, which exceeded 7 million tons of agro-products in 2023. Minister Al-Qusir said that more than 3.5 million fadans had been reclaimed during the recent period, in addition to the implementation of 18 agricultural clusters in Sinai Peninsula. The minister added that nearly £40 billion had been secured to support fertilizer system in 3 years, in addition to activating contract farming system in 8 agricultural crops for the first time. He said that the contract farming usually allows farmers access to some form of credit to finance production inputs. Egypt has been facing food security challenges for years, as it heavily relies on imported wheat to meet domestic demand. Egypt also imports a good amount of rice and other grains to cover local needs. Russia's withdrawal from the Black Sea Grain Export Initiative, which was set to guarantee safe passage for ships carrying grain from Ukrainian ports, is likely to result in a sharp increase in food prices in several East African countries, including Egypt. However, the government has already taken steps to secure grain supplies and ensure market stability. Egypt increased wheat imports by about 34% from the beginning of 2023 until July 18th, reaching 5.66 million tons compared to 4.22 million tons in the same period last year. The United Nations Food and Agriculture Organization stated that Egypt is probably to import around 12 million tons of wheat in fiscal year 2023-2024, positioning the country as top wheat importer in the world. On July 20th, India declared a restriction on non-basmati rice exports, which has also raised concerns about food security in Egypt. The limits led to higher rice prices, which could impact affordability of this staple food in Egypt.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, and we're joined here tonight in this studio to shed more light on our food security file by Dr. Abdel Badr, Professor of Genetics and Biodiversity at Helwani University, and also the Chairman of the Environmental Research Council at the Academy of Scientific Research and Technology. Dr. Badr, thank you very much for joining us this evening.
Thank you for having me.
Dr. Badr, if we're talking about the government's efforts to try and achieve food security. Now, not just Egypt, but the whole world is going through the difficulties and challenges of inflation, economic difficulties, also the trade challenges that are taking place, especially in the Red Sea as well. Now, what sort of measures should the country apply or implement to try and increase its agricultural production, trying to achieve some sort of food security? Obviously, what happened in Russia and Ukraine is the second biggest wheat exporter. Now, and it also withdrew from the Black Sea initiative, as with grain initiative agreement. So we are facing many challenges. What are the measures that the government should implement to increase its agricultural production for 2024? The country is aiming to increase the agricultural production for this year by 30%, which would participate within the increase of GDP by 12%. How can we achieve such great and big goals?
Yes. Of course, Egypt suffers from a gap between population growth and the food productivity, not only now, but for probably tens of years since we first imported wheat for our bread 50 or 70 or 60 years ago. And in the last year, serious attempts have been carried out to increase the land for cultivation, new projects in Toshka, new project in the New Delta, in the Western Desert, new projects in Sinai and other parts of Egypt as well. And that's one approach, is to increase the agricultural land so we can cultivate more land for and also another way is to increase the productivity of the crops we cultivate. And this has been improved. I remember my childhood, the productivity of one faddan of wheat was about half of its productivity today. Due to the improvement of genetic selection for new cultivars that is more productive, not only in wheat but also in other crops as well. But one of the problems is we have a limited agricultural land, we have a limited water supply, so the opportunities to increase land for cultivation new crops and if we do maximum improvement of crop productivity, we still need to address the gap between population growth and food productivity. This is, some people may think this is not relevant to the topic we talk about, food security, but this is important topic we should address, not only for today, for the future as well. Other ways to increase food productivity is to use modern technologies that would limit water use by plants. So with limited resources of water, we can expand more lands expand the lands for producing new crops. We can also breed new crops that is tolerant to drought tolerance. In facing shortage of water supply, we can produce crops that are drought tolerant, and they can use much less water for growth and producing the same amount of grains or fruits or vegetables.
Well, let's start off with the expansion and the increase in the cultivated lands. Now, you've mentioned a few initiatives and projects, the new Delta, also Tushka, there's also Awainet, and now we're talking about the expansion and the increase of the number of agricultural and cultivated lands. Now, how far are we in such initiatives? I mean, yes, we understand that the new Delta will be towards the Western Desert, towards the north as well, but how far are we in actually cultivating this land? Because it amounts to about 1 million fadans. So are we still in the process of just squaring and really bordering this area, or did we actually start? When can we actually start and make use of this?
We actually started some years ago, 5-6 years ago. It's been 5-6 years we talk about new deltas and expansion. And some projects are productive now. Some projects have been producing new crops. That's true. You remember the desert road to Alexandria about 40 or 30 years ago. It was really a desert road, but now to the east and the west of the desert road you see farmlands and so on. This is a sign of success. Of course, success wouldn't be very fast as we wish, but if we do be keeping success every time without stop, without any hesitation, we will be more successful. As we been successful in other parts, we may be successful again in the Western Desert and the Tushka and other parts of the new project. And this wouldn't happen in few years. It takes time. But I think the rate of progress is all satisfactory, but probably in the light of the current world crisis in food security, satisfactory is not good enough for our situation. We need to move from satisfactory to good, to very good, to excellent. Talking about being a university professor, talking about the grades of the students, from just pass the examination to excellence in examination. We need to do more efforts to gain more success in the agricultural land. And some lands may be as fertile as we wish. And for these lands, we can actually cultivate some crops that is tolerant to saline condition in the soil or to harsh conditions in the wadis and the deltas. And after a few years, the soil fertility will increase, and the soil will be more appropriate for cultivating the traditional food we eat, like wheat, maize, and oil crops, which we mostly import from others. By the way, we are self-sufficient in vegetables, in fruits. We export vegetables and fruits like lemon and orange and many other onions and flowers. We are not importing all our food, but we also export food to European countries and to Arab countries as well. And probably these will be suitable for the time being in some parts of the country until the soil fertility improves. And also we need to adapt to more ways and means improve the soil, not only waiting for the soil to improve itself,
Yes.
but there is some smart ways of agriculture that can be applied. There's biotechnological means that would be that would help the plants survive and grow and be more productive under some unfavorable conditions.
Yes. Dr. Badr, now, what about, I mean, if some of the cultivated lands would actually take some time to be appropriate to cultivate certain crops, so what about the option of actually cultivating or farming in other countries, be it in Africa or maybe in other countries outside of the African continent?
This is a good idea, and some other countries have used this approach. I think there was some ideas in the past to cooperate with Sudan, because Sudan have agricultural land and we have experienced farmers, we have more experience in agriculture, and also in Iraq. We remember that the Egyptian farmers who went to Iraq, and Iraq have fertile soil as well. This means or ways of cooperation with some Arab countries like Sudan and Iraq, who have probably more water than we have, and other African countries which have fertile soil and they have water. We can export our experience to these countries and they share the agricultural productivity with them. We have to discuss this through the African Union or some other African countries who are interested. I think with Zambia we have good cooperation. We build dams in Tanzania and in Zambia and some other countries. So cooperation with Africa is not new to us. We were very close to African countries at the time of President Nasser and sometimes after Nasser as well. And now we are going back to African countries, and African countries probably have natural resources, rich natural resources, and with these natural resources we can probably exchange our experience and with their resources and share the benefits from this cooperation.
Well, some of the African countries you've mentioned are actually going through their own difficulties, political and turbulent difficulties, but what about other countries in Europe, such as Holland, or in America, the Midwest, where they have vast areas of land that it would be good for cultivation, but would it add to the finances and the expenses of actually going back and forth to these other different continents?
Well, with Europe, I would be careful. Of course, there is no limits for cooperation, but we have to negotiate and discuss and studies because very few land in Europe is cultivated like our system of cultivation. We use drainage, we use irrigation, but they actually depend on rainfall. So there is rain-fed cultivation and irrigated cultivation. We are clever in irrigated cultivation for thousands of years. So we need some more experience to share with the European. Of course, Europe will have experience, so we can also gain from experience. But this is another possibility for cooperation. Another also, with the southwest of the United States, it may be problematic because of the political situations, but South America, for example, is more promising. Argentina, Brazil, Peru, these countries which we have friendly relationships, and probably also import from Argentina and from Brazil, and probably cooperation with these countries will be more. Of course, no problem if we can cooperate with the United States or in other country, but probably the South American approach would be more easier than the North American one.
Dr. Badr, you've mentioned the methods, how methods in Egypt might be different than the methods followed by in Europe, but what about the progressive or the development of our irrigation methods using artificial intelligence in cultivating? What about using renewable energy as sources of energy and fuel to the machinery being used within agriculture? How far are we in actually developing our methods and mechanisms in
Yes.
agriculture.
Yes. Of course, we need to improve the ways of agriculture, but we are not as underdeveloped as 30 years ago. Now the farmers use machineries. There is no sawahi or our irrigation machinery is not done by animals anymore, but done by machines. Even cultivation is that. In the last 20, 30 years, we developed irrigation by spraying instead of flooding. Because flooding, you flood a lot of water in the
Consume
soil.
a lot of water.
And this one way is to spray as little as possible that's sufficient for the plants to grow. With this way, we save the amount of water given for plants to grow. So we don't use water through evaporation from the soil. Of course, water is lost by plants in transpiration, but this is necessary process for plant growth. We also the dripping ways of irrigation. This is well developed in Egypt. But again, we need to move ahead with smart irrigation, artificial intelligence, as you said. And artificial intelligence can tell us, asking the plants, how much water would you want, how much days to wilting. So using smart irrigation would provide not only water but minerals to the plants, so we can minimize the cost of producing, of cultivating more land and for food production. And with these ways, we can, of course, if we use this water, we can expand in cultivating more land. This is another approach. Probably we need to investigate more in artificial intelligence and smart agriculture. I'm sure our colleagues in the agriculture colleges are working, and agricultural sales center will address this topic, but they need encouragement, they need possibilities, they need projects. Science can work if they have the possibilities. But if you are a good scientist and you don't have a possibility, you will have good ideas. But we need, in agriculture sector, we need production, we need food.
Yes. Well, Dr. Badr, you're the chairman of the Research Council. Now, environmentalist as well. So how far are we in terms of research and development to try and figure out the new possibilities and the new prospects that you're talking about? Because all of the expansion and the increase of the cultivated lands, the technology being used in farming and agriculture, all of these things need a lot of expertise, know-how, and a lot of money as well. So are we fit enough to actually, and well prepared to embark on all these developments on our own? Can the government do this on its own? Do we need the private sector? Do we need foreign investors and foreign expertise?
We need all the things you mentioned. Of course, we need scientists who are qualified enough to do this, because they are the expertise. Of course, the government has to have a political encouragement and planning, and the investor. We need investment. And probably investments comes from private sector. Private sector can play a major role in expanding. And I think the current approach of the government is to encourage private sector. The time of cultivating a new land and giving each farmer a bit of land is gone. And now we look forward big projects, not only owned by a single person or a single family, but these can be cooperative. Many persons can cooperate together to work in a good farm, but they are private sector. They are not part of the governmental bureaucracy. So if I'm not rich enough to have a big farm, my brother, my sister, my neighbor, my colleague, my friend, anybody who is interested in my approach of cultivating land will join me. And this is the new approach to cultivate more land with less dependence on the finance from the government.
Yes.
If we can also even encourage foreign investment to come and to cultivate, or probably cooperate with them to fund and share benefits from our productivity as well.
Yes. Well, ladies and gentlemen, Egypt is sparing no effort to increase the agricultural production by 30% for this year, 2024. Let's check out this report and we'll be right back.
Egypt aims to increase gross domestic product (GDP) contribution of its agriculture sector to 12% by 2024, in addition to increasing agricultural production by 30% by 2024, according to Minister of Planning and Economic Development Al Said, who clarified that this will create job opportunities in the sector and increase income of small farmers while increasing exports. She said this would take place by doubling the sector's share in exports from 17% in 2020 to 25% in 2024. Minister Said said Egypt's agro-food sector takes into account agriculture and food processing as well as related inputs and trade. The sector makes up around 24.5% in GDP and 23.2% in the added value of labor in Egypt. The minister indicated that agriculture and fruit production are among the most attractive investment opportunities in Egypt. The country also boasts good quality soil and climatic conditions, as well as its geographical location close to Arab region and Europe, along with its large participation in trade agreements. She said the government's launch of structural reform program in 2016 focused on raising the productive capacity and competitiveness of the real economy. It had special focus on industry, information and communication technology, and agriculture. Moreover, the program focused on elements related to food security, such as green economy, environmental protection, and facing challenge of an increasing population. It recognizes the fact that there is a need to control population growth rates and deal with water scarcity. Regarding water management, the minister revealed that the government aims to increase water share through desalination, conserving water consumption by modernizing irrigation technology, improving infrastructure through the renewal of the national network of water canals at a cost of £80 billion, and providing new water sources such as reusing wastewater in agriculture and maximizing groundwater use. Said also indicated that Egyptian government is implementing a project of land reclamation, cultivation of 1.5 million fadans to improve food security. It is also adopting a participatory approach to rehabilitating rural areas through one of the largest social protection programs, Decent Life Initiative, which has received investments amounting to $45 billion. She explained that the program, which is looking to cover over 50% of the Egyptian population, aims to modernize rural infrastructure and provide basic and social services to 4,700 villages. Said reviewed the green economy and pointed out that Egypt issued green bonds worth $750 million for a period of 5 years. This represents the first sale of these bonds by a government in MENA region. The minister added that Egypt's vision is consistent with the global trend, and the global green debt market is expected to rise this year. She noted that Climate Bond Initiative expects that global green bonds, loans, and sukuk will reach $400 to $450 billion. This will follow a record growth of the green bond market in 2020, which saw an issuance exceeding $269.5 billion. Said added that Egypt faces two main challenges in addition to the challenge of coronavirus pandemic, namely climate change and water scarcity. She added that the private sector represents a major component of national and regional efforts to strengthen food systems. Al Said noted that the role of the Sovereign Fund of Egypt is as main tool that helps in strengthening the role of the private sector. Al Said spoke about investments and future reforms in the food system in Egypt, with the country's food sector managing to address effects of coronavirus pandemic. The minister also said the country did not witness a shortage of food or a decline in any of the strategic crops. Egypt was also able to ensure food security for the poorest groups, which was achieved through many financial and monetary measures put in place by the government to cushion the economic impacts of the crisis.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, continuing our discussion with Dr. Abdel Fattah Badr. Now, sir, if we want to get into the specifics of the measures that can be implemented to increase our food security and agricultural production as a whole, now, what are the certain crops, what are the certain agricultural crops that we will need to focus on more? The diversity of our cultivation. I mean, you've mentioned that we are self-sufficient in many kinds of vegetables, yes. But what about the basic commodities? What do we need to focus more on? Because to try and narrow the gap between imports and exports, because we seem to be importing a lot of basic commodities.
Yes. Wheat, maize, oil crops. These are the three food commodities which is essential to everyday table for every person. So we are in great need to increase wheat production for our food, bread, and maize, not only for our food, but maize is a crop plants, even other crop plants we can cultivate, like lens, for example, legumes, for example, lens, broad beans, and phaceolus, and other beans, different types of beans, including the bean we eat every day. Yes. This is important. We now went to the extent that we sometimes import beans, which is basic known
breakfast,
food,
at least
food for the Egyptians. This, we can at least be self-sufficient
yes.
in beans and maize as well. These are the priorities for our approach to narrow the gap between our our needs for daily food supply for everybody and the imports. If we improve by 30%, then we will reduce the cost of yes. our food production. Of course, food production in Egypt will also cost
yes.
us, but it will not cost foreign currencies. And we are in great need of foreign currencies for other projects as well. So, in response to your answering your question, wheat, maize, oil crops, and rice. Rice, of course, is not originate. There is some called the domestication of crops thousands of years ago. Legumes and wheat and barley were originated in our area of the world. Maize in the American and rice in Asia. But rice and wheat and maize are world travelers. So everybody cultivate maize, wheat, and rice. These are the basic commodities, not only for Egypt, but for yes. the whole world.
Well, did India's declaration of restrictions on its non-basmati rice exports in July, did that affect our share within the rice we're importing? How much this, along with Russia withdrawing from the Black Sea grain export initiative, how did they affect our food security?
There will always be alternatives to buy your food, not from Russia or even Ukraine. Of course, from Russia and Ukraine we import 1/3 of our wheat, but we still have other alternatives like Australia, like United States, like Argentina, and other countries. But the price will rise. Then we have to pay the higher price yes. for importing from, and also the distance of export and so on. One way is to, Egypt now joined Russia and Brazil and
the BRICS.
And with this association with BRICS, probably you can use different currencies and limit the hard currencies of dollars and euros, and that may contribute to reducing the amount of money we can exchange with Russia, with India, with China, with South Africa, with other countries, with Brazil, not paying hard currencies, but exporting fruits and buying wheat or other crops as well. So we need also to attempt other ways of trading, and not with new countries, and to get out of the dilemma we've been in for years, to pay in dollars and export and buy everything in dollars. If I buy from Russia, I pay with the Russian currency, from South Africa, from Brazil, and so on. That may probably reduce the amount, the money we pay. But this needs studies. It needs some people who are have more expertise in trading. This is not my field of expertise, but this is an approach which is talked about, and people may probably find new ways in attempting to reduce the budget of importing our food as well. With then, of course, domestic policies of increasing land and increasing productivity of crops, that would narrow the gap between food production and the population growth.
Dr. Badr, now everybody, the whole world is really focusing on climate change, and you've participated in COP27 and COP28.
Yes.
And we've seen quite recently different countries within Europe. We've seen even the protests in France recently regarding the change in the dynamics of agriculture and farming in general, because everybody wants to cut down on their carbon emissions, and agriculture and farming plays a huge part in that. So these changes, or this different direction that the whole agricultural world is going through right now, how will this affect us, or will it affect us at all? Will it have a positive impact? Will they see Egypt now as one of the places they can import from, or maybe cultivate or invest in our agricultural sector? Will we be negatively affected because some of these countries that we rely on in importing some of their products will have difficulties in exporting to us or to other African countries? How will the change in the dynamics of the agricultural life within the world affect us?
This is a very complex question that probably needs
another episode. It could be a sequel.
The climate change, of course, is the main cause of agriculture is the emissions.
Yes.
And the main cause of emission is carbon dioxide, of course. And some people talk about reducing carbon dioxide emission will limit or probably reduce the climate change. And of course, agricultural sector contribute to climate change, but only fossil fuels contributes about 70%. Agriculture about 14%. So of course the contribution of agriculture is limited compared to the fossil. The transport and the factories, these are not agriculture, it is factories.
The services associated to agriculture.
So the serious approach to actually reduce climate change is to address the major contributor to carbon dioxide emission, and not to agriculture emission, because agriculture, we need crops. So we need to grow animals for our food, because methane comes from animals in the agricultural crops. So if we cannot stop growing animals for our meat, because animals produce methane, but we can reduce the use of fossil fuel of petrol and use, for example, other ways to cars, electric cars, for example. In Germany, some people are optimistic and assume that in 2030 or 2035, all cars will be electric. And now they produce what they call hybrid cars. This is a more serious approach for climate change reduction than addressing agriculture. Today there is big demonstrations in Europe against, because agriculture is not profitable to the farmers unless the price of the food is increased. And if the production is more costly than the price the population can pay, the farmers will stop cultivation. But what we do if the farmers stop producing food for us? So this is a serious problem. I think Europe will reconsider the measures taken against agriculture, and probably better to address the major cause of climate change, which is industry, is wars. Like, you know, how many bombs are thrown on Ukraine and on Gaza, as this small place. More than 2 nuclear bombs have been fallen on Gaza in the last 2 months. How much emission has went up in the air and caused climate change in 2 months. So we should actually address the major causes and be serious. And the countries who actually cause emissions should pay for reducing the emissions, should help the countries who cultivate, for example, to increase their food production.
Yes. Well, ladies and gentlemen, couldn't have explained it better than Dr. Badr, actually trying to address the main challenges for climate change as opposed to try and change the dynamics of the agriculture, which is definitely essential. A lot of efforts are being exerted by the government to try and increase the agricultural production and achieve food security by 30% for 2024. Unfortunately, that's all the time we have for this edition of the Daily Debate. But before we go, I'd like to thank my distinguished guest, Dr. Abdel Badr, Professor of Genetics and Biodiversity at Helwani University and also Chairman of the Environmental Research Council at the Academy of Scientific Research and Technology. Dr. Badr, it was a pleasure having you with us.
It was a pleasure talking to you too.
Thank you very much, sir. Ladies and gentlemen, please stay tuned for more coming up on Night International. I'm Hani Saif. Thank you for joining us.